practicing curiosity. One of the ways that we can do this is by asking ourselves questions, but I like to encourage people to avoid the why question. It's the difference between why am I spending so much money at Target every single week to what is it about Target that prompts me to spend? What is it providing to me? It puts us in such a different place from I'm on the defense, I'm in fight mode to, I haven't thought about that. What is going on here?
Oh, well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I had a fascinating conversation with Jill Sirianni, who is a licensed clinical social worker. She is also the co-host of Frugal Friends podcast and the co-author of Buy What You Love Without Going Broke. Now, who doesn't want that? So we talked about all the ways that you can stop getting sucked into buying things on Instagram and how you can really align your spending with your values, as the name of the book implies. Right. So it's basically buy what you love without going broke, transform your spending and get more of what money can't buy. So it's really all about how do we build the lives that we want fiscally that are aligned with our values and who we are. And I found this interview so fascinating. I think it's going to help so many of you if you struggle with your finances and feeling masterful of your finances. I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode with Jill Sirianni. So enjoy. Well, hello there. I am super excited to welcome Jill Sirianni to the Terri Cole Show. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you so much for having me, Terri.
I'm so excited to talk about all things how to buy what you love without going broke, because who the hell doesn't want that? I think I really do. Before we get into it, because I know you have a new book coming out, I'm always interested in people's backstory, right? Because all of us do what we do for specific and particular reasons. So I want to ask you, if you were a Marvel movie character, what is your origin story and what brought you here? And then I want to talk about the focus of the book and why that.
Absolutely. My background is actually in mental health. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and have worked in that field, continue to. And along the way, I was in a journey towards debt payoff. At the time, graduating college and entering the field of social work, I made a whole lot less money than I had in debt. And that felt very daunting to me, but the awareness of it was very heavy for me. I know it is for a lot of people who are carrying student loans. And so my husband and I took an unconventional approach to paying down debt, and that was to live in an RV for a couple of years. Not to be some clickbaity young couple touring the United States, truly just to be able to afford housing and put more money aside towards this debt payoff. And in that journey, we did take a couple of weeks to go on a road trip. And that's where I met my now co-host of the Frugal Friends podcast that we've been doing together for about 6 years. But what formed a fast friendship for us was connecting over our debt payoff journeys. She at the time was blogging about personal finance, and I was just doing life, trying to pay down debt. And we really found such community in being able to have conversations about personal finance, debt freedom that has been so stigmatized. And finding this outlet was really refreshing for us. And that just spiraled into, what if we could make this conversation open and available to more people? One of the things that made me feel shut out from personal finance or just finance in general was not understanding. I don't know anything about the acronyms. It felt like a man's world and I have nothing to do with it. Boring, if I can even say it that way. And through my friendship with Jen and having these conversations and starting the podcast, realizing we can know these things. It's actually not that complicated. It's just gate kept, and we can ask questions and we don't have to be ashamed to ask them, and we can find the people who can help us answer them, and we can get better with money and we can feel really confident about the money decisions we're making. Of course, paired with my own counseling of clients, seeing this whole person perspective and recognizing that all aspects of our personhood impacts the others. So we don't just have finances out here lingering in the atmosphere. It's a part of our being alongside spiritual, relational, emotional, physical well-being.
Right.
And I even found myself talking about finances with my clients and how it intersects with boundaries and friendships and the decisions that we're making and the habits that we're forming. And it was really life-giving to me to bring this whole person perspective into the finance space. And it was well received by people. So many have come to us like, thank you for being the person to ask what in the world a Roth IRA is and how we can spend better and why budgets don't work. And we just kept going with it. And it's really been such a joy to teach people how to spend better and feel really empowered with their money decisions.
I love this so much because the stigma around not knowing, right? There was a time in history, of course, when women weren't supposed to know, and we couldn't even get a loan for a business until 1986, and couldn't get a credit card by ourselves since 1973. Anyway, point being,
you know the stats. Yes, you do.
Because it's so unbelievable where you're like, oh my God. So we had decades and more of not knowing and not being the one who's supposed to know. Then 70s come and we can do things more than being a nurse, a teacher, a secretary. Suddenly we now things are opening up. Education is easier to get as a woman. All these things are happening where different careers are opening up where people are making money. Yet there's this huge gap in our learning about money. So how do you see the tie-in of the family of origin with our, I would call it our money blueprint,
Oh, we can't disconnect it. I mean, you know this, you're in the mental health field as well. How we grow up, the environment in which we're in, and our understanding of the world around us shapes the way that we view the world. It shapes our habits, our patterns of relating. And it's no different with money. The way that we see our parents or caregivers, community spending money will most likely be the way that we spend it unless we choose differently, assuming that there are some things that need to be changed in that. And of course, our own experiences. I'm sure you're aware there's this concept within social work, very basic concept, foundational, of person in environment, PIE for short, because we love food acronyms.
Yeah, we do.
It is exactly what you're talking about, Terri, of looking at not just the person and not just the environment, but the individual that exists within the context and the community that they're living in.
Yeah.
And this perspective I found so helpful when it comes to finances of who am I and who am I as I exist in the environment in which I'm in. Right. And really the concept that we talk about in our book is values-based spending. And so much of it is encouraging us to understand ourselves. It's invitational and it is meant to be a process of discovery that can be really life-giving and rewarding, not shame-filled. I know sometimes it can be scary to look at these things and what am I going to unearth and uncover, but truly from this place of curiosity and observation and inquisition to value ourselves enough to want to choose to discover more about who we are and how we choose to operate in the world. And I think through understanding what are the money ideas that I've grown up with? How do I currently engage with money? Is it benefiting me? Is it aligned with the things that I would say are true about me? And if not, are there ways that I can shift that to be more beneficial, more valuing to myself?
So what would you say are the common themes that clients come to you with from their financial blueprints?
Oh, that boundaries. I know you talk about this a lot on your show. When people ask, what do you talk about behind closed doors with your clients? Honestly, that's one of the biggest things, are boundaries across the board though. So, right, boundaries with ourselves, boundaries with friends, boundaries in our finances. I do think that we don't always though know it at that level. Usually it's a bit more of feeling deprived, feeling as though I can't have all of the things that I would want to have. I am limited by XYZ, whether it's income, circumstances, situation, and not feeling like I have enough to get the things that I want. And really, a lot of times it has to do with mindset and perspective on the limitations and how we live and work within the limitations, where we choose to see growth as it relates to our finances, how we're going to choose to, do I want to seek greater levels of income, a different employment position, or is there an opportunity for me to decrease some of my expenses? But a lot of it has to do with where we are giving ourselves permission to have emphatic yeses with our spending and easy no's. But sometimes, usually that takes a lot of work to discover where are the yeses, where are the no's, what's in bounds for me, what's out of bounds for me.
Right.
Again, with relationships and money, that's my simple definition of boundaries, is what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to sift through that. It's a very simple question, but takes decades of work to actually discover and define.
Yes. And what I've seen in my therapy clients and in myself when it comes to financial blueprints, both my parents grew up poor, and then my father did well. And so there was, I think my mother had a negative vibe on people with money. I mean, it seemed like the second my father made it, my mother divorced him. So I don't know what, you're like, are those things together? And she was like, well, I never cared about the money. And yet unconsciously it plants seeds of like, people who want money are bad. Money destroys love. Money, you can't have both. You know, there was all of these unconscious associations that I made that I needed to separate through the therapeutic, my own personal therapeutic process, where it's like, that's actually not true. And even if that was, it's true for my mother, I remember having a conversation with her and I was like, Mom, because she was worried about my drive, sort of worried about me, like worshiping a false god, so to speak. And I was like, hey, Mom, you think that being broke is pious. I don't. That's all. Like, I'm not judging you. Like, you know what I mean? It's almost like, she's got $5,000 at the bank. She's like, right on, I'm good. You're like, no, you're not actually. But she is, because she lives within her means, never needs any help from us kids. She's 87. Like, she's been doing it for a long time. But I see with my own therapy clients, if their parents really valued success and money and wanting them to, my successful clients, wanting them to buy them extravagant gifts as proof of love or whatever it is, right? All families are dysfunctional around money in their own very specific way. But, think about, how often is money a reward or withheld as a punishment?
I so appreciate what you're describing here, Terri, because it's identifying the extremes we can find ourselves in. On the one end can be this scarcity mindset and less is absolutely more, and poverty is, more righteous. And then on the other hand no, you need to make as much money as possible. Your entire life needs to be a hustle. And even when you get married, you need to be a power couple. And both are so extreme. And what we're encouraging towards is holding the tension between both extremes. We can find ourselves and be pulled to one or the other, but really aiming at operating out of what we call the radical middle. Radical because not many people go there. We are drawn to these extremes, the bipolarization in nearly everything. But there are really good things about both ends that we can grab hold of and both and at the same time and walk this radical middle piece. I think one of the things we talk about in the book that you referenced is contentment over complacency and recognizing that we can aim at contentment, but it doesn't mean we are complacent. It doesn't mean that we can't want growth, want new things, want even more money, or less money, but how we go about that does matter. The decisions that we make in that process, and rejecting the extremes and finding what's good in both and navigating that radical middle, really in all aspects of life, but certainly with our finances, that there can be space to make more, and it doesn't mean the destruction of our character, or to choose, I'm actually gonna do less. I'm going to make less so that I can have more time with the people who matter. And that's not a hack at achievement or purpose in life either. And really finding that contentment is that key to walking that fine line.
I love the value-based spending, the idea, because what you just described, Jill, is exactly that, right? If you are valuing more time with your grandbabe or your partner or whatever it is, then you can make informed financial decisions around what you actually want. In the book, you also talk about sort of the problems with telling someone a budget will solve their spending problems. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Budgets usually feel like deprivation. And I'm not saying that we don't put pen to paper and think through how we're going to manage and steward our resources, but I think the way that we've gone about it is antiquated, and it is not a one size fits all. And sometimes the language we use around it really does matter because of that person and environment and our origins and the meaning that we attach to different words. So a lot of times we call it a spending plan because that feels like so much more freedom. But so often we want to start with action. We want to jump to, what are the takeaways? What are the action steps? Just give me the XYZ blueprint. And we know for there to be longevity in any sort of action, we need to start so much further back than that. We need to give ourselves the space and the value to understand who we are, to identify where we've come from, where we want to be going, how are we going to get there? And a lot of that is the mental work, the conversations, the introspection. So budgeting or a spending plan doesn't even happen till practically halfway through the book. We need to lay a foundation. And one of the things that we love to talk about as a pseudo action step is practicing curiosity and doing this with ourselves, having a curious posture. One of the ways that we can do this is by asking ourselves questions, but I like to encourage people to avoid the why question. Not because there's anything wrong with why, but it can put us on the defense. It's the difference between, why am I spending so much money at Target every single week, to what is it about Target that prompts me to spend? What is it providing to me that I want to be there and, purchasing items? It puts us in such a different place from I'm on the defense, I'm in fight mode, to, I haven't thought about that. What is going on here? Another thing that we can do alongside practicing curiosity is a 90-day transaction inventory. And so this is very much like journaling, but it is gathering up all of the purchases that we've made in the past 3 months. That includes what we might even quote unquote described fixed expenses, and going through as much as possible, whether it's in a spreadsheet or we've printed it out, however we want to do it. There is freedom and flexibility here. Identifying with each line item, what was happening here? What came before this? What emotions was I feeling, to the best of my recollection? We're not going to remember it for everything for the past 90 days, but as much as we can, literally journaling alongside it. Who was I with? What was I feeling? What were some of the thoughts? And how do I feel after this? Did the thing meet the need that I was experiencing at the time? And what's going to come out of that is more understanding of self. We're going to start to see patterns of what leads to some of my most frequent purchases. What are the emotions that I'm experiencing surrounding some of the purchases that maybe I didn't feel so great about? what does this transaction inventory tell me about what I value? And does it feel aligned with what I would actually say that I value? Is it getting me closer to the things that are meeting my needs? So often it's like we're throwing spaghetti at the wall with some of our needs and not giving ourselves the attention to say, well, is there a better way to meet this need? And marketers know this. They are playing into all of our subconscious biases and our fear of missing out and our complexity bias and all of these things that get us to impulse spend even more so. And so it's really providing space to push back against this and say, did I purchase this because I was manipulated to do so?
Yeah.
Because, some of the things that are within my brain that are meant to be protective mechanisms kind of worked against me when it came to my wallet here. And what ways can I actually meet the needs that I'm experiencing on a day-to-day basis that might be better uses of my money or might not require me to spend at all?
Right. I feel like impulse spending, impulse shopping, especially social media stuff, like what are the biggest impetuses of impulse shopping and how do we overcome them? Because I feel like stuff is coming at me every minute of every day on social media.
Yeah, there's 5 that we cover in the book. Not to say that this is an exhaustive list, but in our own experiences and in talking with other people, this is what we found. Habit spending. So we've just formed behaviors around what we've become accustomed to. Again, back to that family of origin and the ways in which we grew up. Habit spending, that can be connected to just time of day, location, you name it. We're not even hardly thinking about it. We're just spending because it's what we do. The next is shopping as an activity. It's something that's fun. This certainly for me is one of mine. I grew up going to the mall on the weekends as something to do. And we would call it window shopping, but we would certainly go in and purchase whatever it was that stood out to us and caught our fancy in the moment. The next is stress shopping. Although I'll also say just kind of any emotion can lead us to spend, whether we're feeling happy or sad or celebratory. There can be so many reasons, and our emotions are not, there's no moral failing with it. They are very informative, but sometimes they are the things that, here's an emotion and here's how I'm going to respond to that emotion is with my money, rather than maybe other ways that might care for myself better. The next is social influence. We all are familiar with this one, from Instagram and Facebook to just the people within our community. Even our neighbors have such an impact on the ways in which we choose to spend. Whatever new gadget we see them using in their yard, whatever lights display they are setting up in the next season, you name it, there's people selling us things left and right, whether or not they intend to. The social influence is real. And finally, the thrill of the hunt. This one I'm also guilty of myself.
Same.
I get the rush of a deal. Adrenaline surges for sure. And dopamine hits when I can find something that I feel is rare. And I really dug for this thing and no one else has this. And I've now found it. And just seeing something that's a deal, has a red sticker on it, feels as though I've come across something really unique, and that might cause us to spend as well.
I really feel identified with literally everyone that you mentioned. So give us some ideas of how can we sort of not be sucked into some of these behaviors?
So again, to value ourselves, there's so much about what we're describing here that is meant to be valuing of our personhood, meant to help us understand ourselves and push back against overconsumption and spend in a way that we can feel really good and confident about, pushing against guilt and shame. And so when we can create a pause to recognize even which of these impulse spending ways am I most drawn to, can be one more help along the way in identifying what can I replace this with, right? We're not just talking about deprivation. It might mean sacrifice at times, but not just depriving ourselves for the sake of it, but rather understanding and shifting behaviors. So when it comes to habit spending, I think it's identifying what are the triggers that prompt me to spend in these circumstances, and what can I replace that with? Similar to creating new habits in any aspect of our life, identifying what's the trigger, what's the cue, what's the craving, what's the reward, and what can I replace those things with, which is somewhat connected to stress shopping. So I'll kind of jump to that as well. If it is an emotion that's kind of prompting us, giving ourselves a pause to say, what am I experiencing right now? What is this connected to? And how can I value this emotion? We don't just have to spend to solve our problems or to cope. Oftentimes, there's so many better ways that we can respond to our experiences. So for instance, could we try a new recipe? Could we get outside and enjoy nature? Can we stretch? Can we pick up a new hobby? If there's some sort of celebration happening, can I call a friend and connect with somebody that I haven't connected with in a while? Again, replacing the behavior, not just depriving ourselves from something, but really getting at what's the root here? What is the need? And how can I address that need in a way that's actually going to hit it and not just give me a quick dopamine hit? And then I don't actually appreciate the thing that I just bought. And then I might even feel guilty and ashamed that I spent that money and I shouldn't have. When it comes to social influence, there's a couple of things that I have to say about this one. I don't think social media is bad to engage in. I think it's here to stay. It's inevitable. But we do have the power to curate who we are allowing ourselves to be influenced by. And there are plenty of people, yourself included, Terri, that we can allow into those spaces, into our earbuds, into our eyeballs, giving us the messages that are helping us towards growth and towards the goals that we've identified. So for me, I love watching, low tox, sustainable living accounts and people who are helping me cook the food that I already have at home and problem solve and get creative. And beyond that, I think when we do see, oh, I love this thing that my friend has, I think that would make my life more efficient, or man, that beauty product really does look appealing to me, put it on a list. Because those desires mean something. They tell us something about ourselves, and they do need a place to go. For me, I have a running list on my phone of things that piqued my curiosity, I have a desire for, I'm drawn to, and I value that by writing it on a list. And whenever I am out shopping, I can look through that list. Are there things on here that I do still want? Does this still appeal to me? Can I find it pre-owned? Can I make this myself? There's a lot of different questions that we can be asking there. But I think a lot of it has to do with understanding ourselves more and asking some of these curious, critical questions of what's the underlying need and what could I do that might meet that need more fully.
What I love everything you're saying, but I love the idea of giving us something to do though, because again, we're discharging the energy that we felt compelled to maybe make a purchase. But if we write it down, I'm still doing something. So there's still the fantasy of maybe I will get that. Or maybe, if I wait 2 days, I will no longer want that because it really isn't in my highest and best, or I really don't need it, or I really don't, you know what I mean? So I love the idea of having something to do. And I think that there's something very accessible about what you're teaching and what you're sharing in this book for regular people who don't really have the background, right? Where we're not accountants, but you don't have to be, right? You have to know what your values are. You have to have an idea of how you want to feel. At least that's my takeaway from what you're saying is what is going to make me feel that way. And if I think about someone who just asked me on a different pod, what does it mean to be healthy to you? And what's interesting is that to be financially healthy and to be physically healthy, to me, it's the same thing. It's to be free. Right. And what you're teaching us is how to create financial freedom aligned with our values, who we are and what we want. Because it is one thing for sure from being a therapist for many years, and you see this specifically in your practice, I imagine, is there's no one size fits all. when it comes to what does it mean to be financially free or well to you. Some people don't want. It isn't all the money in the world for everyone. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that does take more work than just to do this, do this, do that, bada bing, bada boom. Your finances are all good. And there are a lot of personal finance people out there who would have you believe that. But we think that there's so much more value in individualizing this approach and recognizing that it doesn't have to look the same way for you that it looks for other people, that you can take as slow as you want to pay off debt. You can invest while paying off debt. You can choose to take a job that makes more, take a job that makes less. Yeah. Whatever it is that's aligning with your goals. And that's the interesting thing about this whole values concept is it's not just spend money on, what sparks joy for you. Although sometimes it does come down to those things where we can feel the freedom in it. But we've discovered along the way that really most people value very similar things. The way that they work it out can look different. But for most of us, it's the 4 F's, we call them: faith, family, friends, and fulfilling work. These are the things that we want more of. And as you can see, money touches all of those things, and all of those things touch all aspects of our personhood.
Yes, they do.
And so some of the questions then around the way that we manage finances can become, what can I be doing now with my money that gets me more of these 4 F's? And in what way do I want to engage in these 4 F's? For example, for myself, this past year, I chose to take lesser money. I kind of stepped back with a previous role that I had so that I could pursue what right now it has become more life-giving to me, which is helping people feel really confident about their finances and the way that they spend. And it has meant scaling back with my income, but that fulfilling work and that flexibility that allows me more time with my family and friends has been immeasurably more important and more life-giving than having a higher salary. And that is a decision that we also can make when we become more intentional with the ways that we're engaging with our finances, the ways in which we are stewarding all of our resources, right? Our emotional currency, our relational currency, our financial currency. Exactly. Yeah. Time truly is the only actual limited currency that we have. And so how we spend that time, that matters. And I think this message that you can choose to step back and it still be a wise financial decision is something that I think a lot of us need to be able to hear. Just that permission and freedom to make the decisions that are going to be right to you for your season. And it's not a one size fits all. It's going to take some work, but these are the principles that have longevity to them, can follow us for decades, regardless of where our income's at, where our spending's at, what our life stage is. These things can remain constant truths for us.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So you guys, the book is Buy What You Love Without Going Broke, Transform Your Spending and Get More of What Money Can't Buy. So you guys can pre-order. The book is ready for pre-order right now. It is actually dropping January 7th. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Every part of that. BuyWhatYouLoveBook.com.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, so where do they get it and where can people find you?
Frugal Friends, we put out 2 episodes a week of a podcast anywhere that you're listening to podcasts.
So great to have you, Jill. Thank you so much for writing this book. I think it's going to help millions of people. I appreciate you spending time on the pod with me.
Thank you for your time. It's been a privilege.